The rain fell in sheets across the empty highway, drumming against the asphalt with a steady rhythm that seemed to match the beating of Sarah's heart. She sat behind the wheel of her silver sedan, staring through the windshield at the storm that had trapped her on this desolate stretch of road. The engine had died 20 minutes ago, leaving her and her 5-year-old daughter Emma stranded in the growing darkness. Sarah pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, feeling the weight of the past month crushing down on her shoulders. Just weeks ago, she had been the successful CEO of a thriving tech company, living in a penthouse overlooking the city, with a team of hundreds working under her leadership. Now, everything she had built over 15 years was gone. The bankruptcy had come swiftly, like a wildfire consuming everything in its path. Poor investment decisions, a failed product launch, and the sudden withdrawal of their biggest client had created a perfect storm. Within days, she had lost the company, her home, her savings, and her reputation. The board had voted her out unanimously, and the media had painted her as another fallen executive who had let success go to her head. "Mommy, I'm scared," Emma whispered from the backseat, clutching her worn teddy bear closer to her chest. The little girl's blonde hair caught the occasional flash of lightning, and her blue eyes were wide with worry. Sarah turned to face her daughter, forcing a smile that she hoped looked more convincing than it felt. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're safe in the car. The storm will pass soon." But even as she said the words, Sarah wasn't sure she believed them. They had been driving for hours, trying to reach her sister's house in the neighboring state. It was their only option now, the only place they had left to go. Sarah had packed their remaining belongings into 2 suitcases and loaded them into the trunk, along with the last of their money and what little dignity she had left. The rain continued to pound against the car, creating rivers that flowed down the windows and distorted the world outside. Sarah tried the ignition again, turning the key with desperate hope, but the engine remained silent. She had no mechanical knowledge, no understanding of what might be wrong. In her former life, she would have simply called for help, summoned a team of assistants to handle such problems. Now, she was utterly alone. Thunder rolled across the sky, and Emma whimpered softly. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed into the backseat, pulling her daughter close. The child was warm and small in her arms, a precious reminder of what truly mattered. Sarah had been so focused on building her empire, on proving herself in a male-dominated industry, that she had often forgotten the simple joy of holding her little girl. "Tell me a story, Mommy," Emma said, her voice barely audible over the storm. Sarah closed her eyes, searching her memory for one of the fairy tales she used to tell when Emma was smaller, before the demands of running a company had consumed her every waking moment. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice soft and steady, "there was a brave little princess who lived in a tall tower." As she spoke, weaving a tale of magic and adventure, Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. This was what mattered, she realized. Not the corner office or the stock options or the board meetings that had once defined her existence. This moment, this connection with her daughter, was worth more than all the success she had lost. The story was interrupted by a gentle tapping on the passenger window. Sarah's heart jumped, and she instinctively pulled Emma closer. Through the rain-streaked glass, she could see the shadowy figure of a man. Standing beside their car, he wore a baseball cap and a worn jacket, and he was making gestures that seemed to indicate he wanted to help. Sarah hesitated, her mind racing through all the warnings about strangers and dangerous situations. But they were stranded, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. Carefully, she rolled down the window just a crack, enough to hear what the man was saying. "Engine trouble," he called out, raising his voice to be heard over the rain. "I've got a tow truck just up the road. Name's Jake. I can take a look if you'd like." Sarah studied his face in the dim light. He appeared to be in his 40s, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. There was something reassuring about his presence, something that reminded her of her father, who had been a carpenter before his death 10 years ago. "I don't have much money," Sarah admitted, her voice barely carrying through the narrow opening in the window. Jake smiled, and the expression transformed his weathered features. "Let's worry about getting you folks back on the road first. Money's not everything, you know." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Sarah. She had spent her entire adult life believing that money was everything, that financial success was the ultimate measure of a person's worth. Now, sitting in a broken-down car with nothing but the clothes on her back and her daughter in her arms, she was beginning to understand how wrong she had been. She made her decision and rolled down the window fully. "Thank you," she said simply. Jake nodded and jogged back to his truck, which Sarah now noticed was parked on the shoulder about 50 yards ahead. The vehicle was old and practical, with a hydraulic lift on the back and tools scattered across the dashboard. It was the kind of truck that spoke of years of faithful service, of problems solved and people helped. Within minutes, Jake had returned with a toolbox and a flashlight. He popped the hood of Sarah's car and began his examination, the beam of light dancing across the engine components as he worked. Sarah watched him through the windshield, marveling at his calm efficiency and the gentle way he handled her car, as if it were a living thing that deserved respect. "Looks like your alternator gave out," Jake called through the rain. "I can't fix it here, but I can tow you to my shop. It's not fancy, but it's dry, and I've got coffee on the stove." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her such simple kindness, such genuine concern for her welfare. In the corporate world, every gesture had come with strings attached, every favor had carried a price. Jake's offer seemed to come from a different universe entirely, one where people helped each other simply because it was the right thing to do. "That's very generous," Sarah said, climbing out of the car to help transfer their belongings to Jake's truck. The rain soaked through her expensive blazer within seconds, but she found that she didn't care. The clothes that had once symbolized her success now felt like a costume from a play that had ended badly. Jake insisted on carrying both suitcases, and he helped Emma into the cab of his truck with the patience of a man who understood children. The interior was warm and smelled of coffee and motor oil, scents that Sarah found oddly comforting. Emma curled up between them, still clutching her teddy bear, and within minutes she had fallen asleep. The ride to Jake's shop took 20 minutes, during which Sarah found herself telling him about their situation. She didn't reveal the full extent of her fall from grace, but she explained that they were traveling to stay with family, that things had been difficult lately. Jake listened, without judgment, offering occasional words of encouragement and understanding. His shop was a modest building on the outskirts of a small town, with a hand-painted sign that read, "Jake's Auto Repair," in simple block letters. The garage bay was cluttered but organized, filled with the tools and equipment of an honest trade. Jake's office was a small room attached to the main workspace, with a desk covered in invoices and a coffee pot that looked like it had been brewing for hours. "You folks can stay here tonight," Jake said, showing them to a small apartment above the shop. "It's not much, but it's got a bed and a kitchenette. Used to rent it out to a young mechanic who worked for me, but he moved on to bigger things." Sarah wanted to protest, to insist that she couldn't accept such generosity, but the exhaustion of the past month had caught up with her. Emma was still sleeping, and the thought of a warm, dry place to rest was more appealing than any five-star hotel she had ever stayed in. The apartment was simple but clean, with a single bedroom and a living area that overlooked the main street of the town. Sarah tucked Emma into the bed and then sat by the window, watching the rain continue to fall. The storm was beginning to weaken, she noticed, and patches of clear sky were visible between the clouds. Jake had gone back downstairs to secure her car in the garage, but he returned shortly with 2 cups of coffee and a plate of sandwiches. "Figured you might be hungry," he said, setting the food on the small table. "My wife used to say that problems always looked smaller on a full stomach." Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Used to?" she asked gently. Jake's expression grew distant for a moment. "Lost her to cancer 3 years ago. She was the one who really ran this place, you know. I just turned the wrenches. She handled the books, dealt with the customers, kept everything organized. When she died, I thought about selling up, moving away. But this place was our dream, and I couldn't let it go." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. Here was a man who had lost everything that mattered to him, yet he had found the strength to continue, to help others, to maintain his dignity and purpose. She thought of her own losses, which suddenly seemed smaller in comparison. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Jake nodded, accepting her sympathy with grace. "What about you? Emma's father?" Sarah took a sip of coffee, the bitter warmth spreading through her chest. "He left when Emma was 2. Said he wasn't ready for the responsibility. I threw myself into work after that, trying to prove that I could do it all, be everything Emma needed and still build a successful career. I guess I convinced myself that providing for her financially was the same as being there for her. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with regret and self-recrimination. Sarah had never spoken those words aloud before, had never acknowledged how her pursuit of success had cost her precious time with her daughter. "You're here now," Jake said simply. "That's what matters." They talked through the night, sharing stories and perspectives as the storm gradually subsided. Jake spoke of his wife, of the simple pleasures they had found in running the shop together, of the satisfaction that came from fixing things that were broken. Sarah found herself opening up about her fears, her uncertainties about the future, her guilt over the choices she had made. As dawn broke over the small town, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months: peace. The apartment was filled with soft morning light, and Emma was still sleeping soundly, her face relaxed and innocent. Jake had fallen asleep in his chair, the empty coffee cup resting on his lap. Sarah studied his weathered face, noting the lines that spoke of years of hard work and honest living. There was a contentment about him, a sense of purpose that she envied. He had lost his wife, his partner, his best friend, yet he continued to find meaning in his work, in helping others. Sarah walked to the window and looked down at the main street of the town. It was a place she would have driven through without stopping just a few weeks ago, dismissing it as insignificant, irrelevant to her important life in the city. Now she saw it differently. The modest homes, the family-owned businesses, the people starting their day with simple routines, there was something beautiful about it all, something she had been too busy to notice before. When Emma woke up, she was full of questions about their new surroundings. Jake showed her around the shop, explaining how the different tools worked, letting her help with small tasks. The little girl was delighted by the attention, and Sarah watched with growing amazement as her daughter blossomed under Jake's patient guidance. It took 2 days for the parts to arrive to repair Sarah's alternator. During that time, she found herself helping around the shop, answering phones, organizing paperwork, tasks that would have been beneath her notice in her former life but now felt purposeful and satisfying. Jake paid her a modest daily wage, insisting that she had earned it, and for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt useful again. On their last evening in the apartment, Sarah sat with Emma on her lap, reading from a picture book they had found on the shelf. The little girl was content and happy, more relaxed than Sarah had seen her in months. The stress of their situation seemed to have melted away in the simple environment of the shop. "I like it here, Mommy," Emma said, leaning against Sarah's chest. "Jake is nice. He fixed my teddy bear's ear when the stitching came loose." Sarah looked at the beloved toy, noting the careful repair work. It was such a small thing, yet it spoke volumes about the kind of man Jake was, the attention he paid to details, the care he showed for things that mattered to a child. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Sarah and Jake sat in the office, sharing a final cup of coffee. The atmosphere was comfortable, familiar, as if they had known each other for years rather than days. "The car's ready," Jake said quietly. "Alternator's good as new. Should get you to your sister's place without any trouble." Sarah nodded, feeling a strange reluctance to leave. "Thank you for everything. For the repairs, for letting us stay, for showing me that there are still good people in the world." Jake smiled, that same gentle expression that had reassured her on the first night. "We all need help sometimes. The important thing is knowing what really matters when everything else falls away." "And what's that?" Sarah asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. Jake's eyes moved to the ceiling, where Emma was sleeping peacefully above them. "Family. Love. The people who matter most. Everything else is just extra." The next morning, Sarah loaded their belongings back into the repaired car. Emma hugged Jake goodbye, making him promise to take good care of her teddy bear's ear. The child was sad to leave, but excited about the prospect of seeing her aunt. As Sarah prepared to drive away, Jake walked over to her window. "You'll be okay," he said with quiet confidence. "You've got something more valuable than any business or bank account. You've got her." Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes as the truth of his words settled in her heart. For so long, she had measured her worth by external achievements, by the size of her office and the numbers in her portfolio. She had lost sight of the one thing that truly mattered, the one success that couldn't be taken away by market forces or board decisions. Emma was her greatest achievement, her most important legacy. Everything else had been temporary, but this love, this bond between mother and daughter, was eternal. She had been so focused on providing for Emma's future that she had nearly missed Emma's present, the precious years of childhood that would never come again. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Jake stepped back and waved as they drove away. In the rearview mirror, Sarah watched the shop grow smaller, but the lessons she had learned there would stay with her forever. She had lost her company, her fortune, her status, but she still had the most important thing of all. As they drove toward their new life, Emma chattering happily in the backseat about all the things she wanted to tell her aunt, Sarah felt a sense of hope that had been absent for months. The future was uncertain, and there would be challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid. She had rediscovered her priorities, remembered what it meant to be truly wealthy. The road stretched out before them, leading toward new possibilities, new chances to build a life based on love rather than ambition, on presence rather than success. Sarah pressed gently on the accelerator, eager to begin again, grateful for the storm that had brought her to Jake's shop and back to herself. In losing everything, she had found what mattered most. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift of all.